Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here with us today because, wow, we are going to look at some data that totally challenges what we think we know about history. We're diving into the mysteries of the pyramids, specifically uncovering the data behind the Great Pyramids of Egypt. You know, we've all read the textbooks, right? We've all seen the standard documentaries, but when you actually isolate the raw physical and mathematical data from the site itself, well, a completely different, way more complex picture starts to emerge. Seriously, buckle up, because the data we're unpacking today is literally mind-bending.
Did the Egyptians really build the pyramids? I know. It sounds like a completely absurd question at first glance. For generations, the answer has just been an absolute, unquestionable yes. But today, we're going to act as data detectives. We're putting aside our baseline assumptions to look strictly at the anomalies, the geological records, and the sheer mathematical precision laid out in our source material. And honestly, by the end of this, you might just find yourself asking that exact same question.
So let's dive right into our first clue, the missing mummies mystery. This is arguably the most glaring anomaly in traditional Egyptology, and it's a massive elephant in the room when you actually stop to think about it.
To really get why this is a mystery, we first need to establish the baseline. The common belief, the one we've all been taught after years of accepted historical narrative, is pretty straightforward. We learn that these massive pyramids were essentially just grand, incredibly elaborate tombs, right? They were built to house the remains of ancient pharaohs, to elevate them to godhood, and ensure a safe trip to the afterlife. That's the story.
But here's where we hit a massive, jarring contrast between that expectation and the actual historical evidence. If these structures were purely tombs, well, you'd obviously expect to find the pharaohs inside them. Yet, in reality, despite centuries of searching, nobody has ever found a single mummy inside the Great Pyramids. Not a single one. Zero. It's kind of like the ultimate game of ancient hide-and-seek, except, well, nobody was actually hiding. There's absolutely no evidence of a mummy ever being discovered within these specific structures, which forces us to ask, if they weren't tombs, what on earth were they?
To figure that out, we need to shift gears. We're moving away from what's missing on the inside and looking at the staggering physical reality of the structures themselves. Let's look at the impossible engineering and precision.
The sheer scale here is, well, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The Great Pyramid is made up of about 2,300,000 limestone blocks. And we aren't talking about regular bricks you'd see at a construction site. Each one of these blocks weighs around 5 tons. To put that crazy number into perspective, that is the weight of a full-grown adult elephant. Try to imagine moving 2.3 million elephants and stacking them flawlessly on top of each other. No way, right?
And the overall footprint? Just as massive. The base of the pyramid covers a staggering 13 acres of land, and it shoots up into the sky to a towering height of 481 feet. Now, building something that huge with ancient hand tools is already mind-blowing, but it's actually the precision of this massive scale that leaves modern engineers completely baffled today.
Get this, the east and west walls of the pyramid align perfectly, and I mean perfectly, with true north. Pulling that off thousands of years ago requires the kind of accuracy you'd only get from a modern compass. On top of that, making a 13-acre base perfectly flat is an absolute logistical nightmare. Yet, the pyramid's base is completely level, with a margin of error of just 0.75 inches. Any structural engineer will tell you, achieving that kind of flawless leveling across 13 acres practically demands modern laser technology.
And then you look at the four walls. Each side is roughly 230 meters long. Across all four of these massive sides, which, remember, are built out of those 5-ton stone blocks, the maximum difference in length between any of the walls is just 2 inches. 2 inches. That gives us an accuracy rate of 99.98%. This isn't just a bunch of guys doing some heavy lifting. This is high-level, pinpoint precision engineering.
Okay, let's slow down for a second, because as incredibly impressive as that physical construction is, the mathematical secrets hidden within the building's dimensions are even more shocking. We are talking about Earth's dimensions in stone.
To really grasp this math, we first need to quickly unpack a specific astronomical event, the solar equinox. You might already know this, but it happens just twice a year, specifically on March 21st and September 22nd. On these two exact days, the sun sits perfectly directly over the Earth's equator. This creates a state of total balance. It results in exactly 12 hours of daytime and exactly 12 hours of nighttime. So what does a 12-hour day have to do with the Great Pyramid? Well, let's walk through the math step by step exactly as the source presents it. Step 1, we take those 12 hours of the equinox day. Step 2, we convert those 12 hours into seconds. That gives us exactly 43,200 seconds. Step 3, we use that very specific number, 43,200, as a multiplier against the physical dimensions of the pyramid. And guys, the results are genuinely staggering.
If you take the Great Pyramid's height and multiply it by 43,200, you get roughly 6,333 kilometers. Now, why does that matter? Because that matches the exact polar radius of the Earth with 99.63% accuracy. Mind blown, right? But wait, it gets better. Take the pyramid's base perimeter, which is 0.921 kilometers. Multiply that by 43,200, and you get a number that mirrors the Earth's exact circumference with 99.34% accuracy. Hitting over 99% accuracy twice using a specific number pulled from a solar equinox, a lot of researchers argue that mathematically that just stretches way, way beyond mere coincidence. It implies the builders somehow knew the exact dimensions of the Earth.
Let's take a quick breather here. I've got a seemingly simple question for you. Just picture a pyramid in your mind. How many sides does it actually have? Your gut reaction is immediately going to be 4, right?
Well, surprisingly, that's actually incorrect. In this incredible, almost hidden architectural reveal, the Great Pyramid actually has 8 sides. Seriously, each of the 4 main faces is subtly concaved, basically split right down the middle. But the catch is, you absolutely cannot see this from the ground. This 8-sided feature is only visible from up in the sky, and only under the very specific lighting conditions of, yep, you guessed it, the solar equinox. It is so well hidden that nobody even discovered it until 1940, when a British Air Force pilot happened to fly over the site at the exact right time. Once again, that connection to the equinox is just undeniable.
So, let's recap where we're at. We've got missing mummies, mathematically impossible structures, and a clear obsession with the cosmos, which naturally leads us to our next point, the Sphinx and the stars.
All this data opens the door to some fascinating alternative theories from different researchers. For instance, author Graham Hancock introduces a really interesting astronomical hypothesis in his book Fingerprints of the Gods. He points out that the layout of the 3 main Giza pyramids perfectly mirrors the alignment of the 3 stars that make up the belt in the Orion constellation.
But actually, here is where the timeline gets incredibly complicated. See, the widely accepted construction date for the pyramids is roughly 4,500 years ago. However, the stars in the Orion constellation, they don't perfectly align with the pyramids today. And they definitely didn't align 4,500 years ago either. According to astronomical tracking software, the absolute perfect match between those stars and the layout of the pyramids last occurred about 13,500 years ago, right around the year 11,400 BC. And as we know, that is way, way before the recognized ancient Egyptian civilization even existed.
Now, if you think the astronomical stuff is wild, wait until we look at the physical, geological evidence right next door. Boston University professor Robert Schoch has extensively analyzed the Great Sphinx. You know, that massive 240-foot limestone monument sitting right by the pyramids? And his theory is that the deep, vertical weathering patterns carved into the Sphinx are actually consistent with heavy water flow and massive rainfall. He argues this kind of erosion isn't just from centuries of dry wind and sand blowing around.
Here's the thing about that. The Giza Plateau has been a bone-dry desert since the time of the pharaohs. For the Sphinx to have experienced heavy rushing water erosion, it would have had to be exposed to massive, sustained flooding. And geological data points us right to the end of the last ice age, around 9,700 BC, when melting glaciers actually raised global sea levels by 500 feet. That caused massive water flow across the region, and once again, that time frame completely, totally predates the ancient Egyptians.
So, stepping back for a moment to look at the big picture, all these incredibly complex, totally disparate data points start leading us toward one major question. Was there an older, advanced civilization?
Let's just do a rapid-fire recap of the anomalies we've found so far. We've got the glaring lack of mummies. We've got advanced Earth-scale math literally embedded into the stone. We've got true north alignment, laser-like leveling, the Orion star correlation, and Sphinx water erosion pointing straight to the Ice Age. Oh, and let's add one final, absolutely crucial piece to this puzzle. The ancient Egyptians were incredibly meticulous record keepers, right? They wrote down everything. Yet in all the thousands of hieroglyphics we've found detailing their history, their agriculture, their religion, there is literally zero mention, zero information regarding the actual construction of these great pyramids.
So, looking at all this source material ultimately leaves us weighing two very contrasting ideas. Theory A is your traditional textbook view. The ancient Egyptians built them about 4,500 years ago, using immense manual labor and rudimentary tools, and all of those mind-blowing mathematical alignments are just, well, really lucky coincidences. Then you have Theory B, the alternative hypothesis. These structures were actually built way earlier by a highly advanced lost civilization, one that totally understood the Earth's exact dimensions. And the ancient Egyptians that came later, they simply found them, inherited them, and basically claimed them as their own.
Which naturally brings us right back to where we started, but now with a completely new perspective. When you look at the geological anomalies, the staggering mathematics, and the absolute lack of any construction records, we are left with a seriously fascinating mystery. Did the ancient Egyptians actually build the pyramids, or did they just inherit them? It's a lot to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep questioning things, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next one.